Hello and welcome to Camp Xbox. I don't know about you, but discussing canceled games is equally as fun as it is sad. It's fun because it's cool to look into some seriously ambitious titles, but it's unfortunate because we'll never get to try a completed version of these games. It's a great topic though, since the original Xbox had so many canceled games. To keep it concise, I'm going to discuss a few select titles that I find interesting. I mean, there are way too many canceled Xbox games to do a whole list on them. There's a great wiki just for canceled Xbox games, and it's overwhelming. So I'm definitely going to miss a few, and let me know in the comments what you want to hear on the next iteration of this list. I'd like to thank all my YouTube channel members for their support, and let's go ahead and hop into the first game. First up is BC, which was being developed by Intrepid Computer Entertainment, who is connected to Lionhead Studios. I'd like to acknowledge that a lot of the video content in this video is not my own and was found around the internet. Additionally, extensive research was conducted for these topics, looking into magazines and old websites. I'm going to place all sources in the description, and also I'm going to be sure to place links to every video that I used. But starting off with BC, this was a third-person action game that seemed ambitious, which was most likely the reason we never saw it. This one is extremely notorious because it got hyped up by the hype machine master Peter Molyneux. This game boasted that it had over 100 technologies, and when they described the game, it lived up to that claim. This was a prehistoric RPG where you play as a caveman and you lead a tribe. It would have combat, but also a food chain design where you moved yourself up the food chain. Not only that, there was a Pokemon-like system where you could capture and tame dinosaurs. It felt like a prehistoric sandbox RPG, and with that kind of ambition in 2002, it was no wonder magazines were loving it. There are other small touches, such as crafting weapons from the world, and your tribe having a different class system. Hearing all of this sounds incredible. Set in a vast world, it felt like a game meant to be one of the best on the Xbox. It also featured giant T-Rexes that would take your entire tribe to kill. And that sounds amazing. Not only that, but seeing screenshots and videos, this game was going to be gorgeous with an insanely detailed world. Blades of grass were going to be visible. Bumblebees were going to buzz around, and they would go to flowers and pollinate them, which sounds like a straight Peter Molyneux lie. To me, looking at the gameplay, it probably wouldn't have achieved the highs that were touted in marketing, but I still think it would have made for an incredible game. It was first scheduled for 2003, but it was pushed back to 2004, and then Molyneux gave a bad omen by saying that he was unsure if they could release something so ambitious, and it got canned in 2004. It was never really stated why, but the prevailing rumor is that the ambition killed it, as it had too many mechanics for the time it was released. Next, let's talk about one that is very close to my heart, True Fantasy Live Online. This could have been a major hit for the Xbox if it had been released. This was going to be an Xbox MMO, which the Xbox had, but this felt like something truly special. This was an RPG that Level 5 had wanted to do when Microsoft approached them. Level 5 had made Dark Cloud and Dark Chronicles at this time, which were great PS2 games. They instead went forward with a console MMO, which had some ambitious ideas behind it. The idea was to scrap a leveling system in favor of a skill-based system. There would be a ton of skills, mostly related to battle, and some related to cooking and crafting. The idea was that in this world, you could be a mix of 30 different classes, and some were unrelated to combat at all. You could be a chef where you'd get cooking supplies, make dishes, and sell them in the town. It seemed like any crafter was going to be able to do this. An idea that I love because I always enjoy more social MMOs where you could live any life you want in this universe. It was to take full advantage of Xbox Live and allow for fully voiced communication along with text. There was going to be small apartment-sized living spaces you could customize with your own items, and there was a ton of mounts planned for this game upon launch, and I'm sure there would have been more to come with updates. The anime art style also looked beautiful, and I'm sure it would have been a great sight on the Xbox. It was a big idea, but the cracks were showing as 2003 rolled around when it was to be shown. They were hyping up this game and showed some gameplay, but there were key elements missing, and too many ideas, especially for magazines like Official Xbox Magazine, were not properly explained. Well, 2003 passed, and then they pushed it to 2004. There are gameplay videos that do exist of this game, and it's said that this game was nearly completed, but Microsoft pulled the plug on it. Later, when he was interviewed, the CEO of Level 5 said he was immensely immensely disappointed by this, stating that he thought it was a general lack of popularity for the Xbox in Japan that got it canceled. I think that's a bad excuse if that's true though, because it looked incredible. A big MMO on the Xbox could have been the next big thing for it, and I think dropping it due to a lack of Japanese support was a bad move, especially when you could have just moved it to the 360 launch if things were that behind. There was so much potential here, and this is the saddest loss on today's list in my eyes. Next is the Unseen, or as it was known early in development, Warcaster. This was going to be made by Tremor Entertainment, who had worked on some Dreamcast games like Kiss Psycho Circus. They were working with Xbox to make a spellcasting game, and if you own some Xbox exclusives, you can find this one in the little upcoming games booklet included. This is why this one has always intrigued me, because they wanted this to be a big series for them, and they promoted it so much. I wanted this game, and it never happened. Looking through this booklet when I was young, I always wanted this game. A book was even discussed to release with it alongside Fall of Reach, which is the Halo book. This game was originally called Warcaster and would have you play a goth girl named Moira. She had spellcasting powers and could see dark powers hidden in the shadows of the world. At least that's what I got out of the scant information available for this one. The gameplay and screenshots we have do look like a lot of fun, and there seem to be a wide mix of powers that she could use. And she also seems nimble. There's one section where she flips all around, which means it could have been a neat platformer too. Not much is known about the combat besides that though, and this game looked gorgeous. An early official Xbox Magazine demo disc has test footage of Moira dancing. It was designed to showcase the lighting capabilities of the Xbox, and overall it's a great looking game. I could have easily have seen this as a strong Xbox franchise. I think Moira is a cool looking character, and a mix of horror and action, especially in the early 2000s, was a good recipe for a good game. Yet this one was canceled by Microsoft after they pulled their publishing contract with Tremor, and this game and Tremors became Unseen. And sorry for the lame joke, I had to do it. Next is Snake Plisken Chronicles. This is one I've only learned about recently, but I'm so sad we never got it because it sounded awesome. This is our first one on today's list that was not an Xbox exclusive, but was also planned for a PS2 release. Namco Home Tech developed it, and it was based on Snake Plisken from the Escape series. Escape from New York is an excellent movie, so I'm down for any game tied to it. Snake Plisken is a badass character, and he'd fit right into an action game. This game, based on the footage that we have, appears to be using the Dead to Rights engine. The slow-mo shooting, the health bar, all of it seems like Dead to Rights. I really enjoy that first game, so I'm sure it would have been fun to play. It also wasn't going to be a remake of the movie, but a continuation of Plisken's plot after Escape from LA. Director John Carpenter and producer Deborah Hill were both on board and gave ideas. Carpenter seemed to be working on the music as well, and he's one of my favorite composers for movies, and I'm sure he would have rocked here. One of the biggest inclusions though was Kurt Russell being on board. They had his face scanned on the main character, so it could look exactly like him. So many people were on board, and it seemed to be destined to be a great action game with an awesome post-apocalypse setting. It was announced in 2003 and even got a website and a demo created for it, though due to some unconfirmed reasons, it was canceled by its 2005 release date. Some of these, I'd love to know why this happened, especially if they had a demo and everything. To me, this game seemed like a surefire hit, but sometimes things just don't work out. I think it would have been cool to get a Snake game, but who knows, maybe we'll get one day. Ever since Rare made Conker's Bad Fur Day for the Nintendo 64, Conker has been a fixture for characters that need more love, especially from his cult following. He's a character who never seemed to get his other game. He was the crude, nasty little mascot for Rare, and the original game is really fun. So why has it never happened? And honestly, the answer seems to be bad timing and just Microsoft. So Conker's Other Bad Day was being developed by Rare as soon as the original came out. Nothing too substantial came out of it, it seems, but a full plot does exist, and you can even find the script on Unseen 64. Though no gameplay was shown, you can assume it was a platformer in the same vein as the original. So Rare was ready to take another step into the series, but by 2002, Rare was bought by Microsoft. They changed plans a bit because it seemed like there was a big push to make a remake of Conker and add in multiplayer. We did eventually get that game in 2005, which was a late Xbox release, as the Xbox 360 would come out that year as well. In the meantime, Rare was working on Other Bad Day, but Microsoft was pushing all of their upcoming projects to the 360 launch. And Rare would push Perfect Dark Zero and Cameo over to the 360, but it seems like the series developer for Conker wanted to keep it on the Xbox and didn't want to add even more time to development, and then it was dropped altogether. There was another Conker game in development as well called Conker Gettin' Medieval, which Rare actually has a video of. This was going to be a Conker's World game, where it was set in the universe, but Conker wasn't the star. It was a multiplayer-focused game, sort of like a spin-off of the multiplayer modes from Live and Reloaded, except it was set in medieval times. The concept seems kind of loose, but it seemed like it was going to be a level-based format, but you'd face off against real people online, and you'd also cooperate with real people online. I can't tell if this was meant for the Xbox or Xbox 360, but I'm still going to put it here since we are just talking Conker. All that exists for this game is just some concept art of Live and Reloaded multiplayer models in a medieval setting. This game got canned as well. One nice thing about Rare, though, is that they do a good job of keeping track of all of these canceled projects. Unfortunately, the series developer did leave Rare, which left Conker in limbo. He'd appear a few more times in weird places like Project Spark, but otherwise, he's hardly around, which is a major disappointment. Either of these games would have been cool to have. So here I have a bunch of Star Wars games that I put together. Some of these don't have a lot of information behind them, so I thought it'd be worthwhile just to pair them up. First is the port of Star Wars Galaxies. Galaxies was an MMO that I've always wanted to play, and though the server shut down in 2011, you can play fan versions of it now. And I got to play some, and to be honest with you, I was overwhelmed, but it's definitely cool. It's an MMO set in the Star Wars universe, but not the Old Republic. It has characters like Han Solo in it. You could pick a bunch of classes, and I know I'm weird, but I like the idea of Star Wars games where you're not a Jedi. You could play a Jedi in this game, but you could also take on non-combat roles like an entertainer. I just like the idea of exploring that universe without Jedis because that's what we've seen so much of. In 2002, console versions of Galaxies were announced for Xbox and PS2. It doesn't seem like it would have been cross-server with the PC, as Sony Online Entertainment said the Xbox version would be its own multiplayer experience. I think the Xbox needed more MMOs, and this could have boosted that a lot. It would have taken advantage of Live, but this game barely received any more news after this. And some magazines would occasionally bring it up, but ultimately, the Xbox and PS2 versions were canceled. Another canceled Xbox game was a Rogue Squadron collection, which would be a compilation of Rogue Squadron from the Nintendo 64 and the 2 GameCube entries ported to the Xbox. These are some of the best flight arcade games you can play, with the second one being an early favorite of mine. Well, the developer Factor 5 was hoping to bring that to the Xbox. It would have improved graphics, and it seemed like Factor 5 wanted to bring in a multiplayer component into the game as well. And supposedly it was halfway finished, but LucasArts canceled it, and then Factor 5 worked on a canceled sequel for the 360, and then they made Lair, and then they went back to the compilation idea, but it went to the Wii, and it was going to be a technically impressive port for the Wii, but unfortunately, this one got canceled in 2008 due to the financial crisis. I really think this could have been another great Star Wars game to boost up an already great set of games on the Xbox. It looked incredible on the GameCube, but I'm sure the Xbox could have really pushed it. The final Star Wars game is an untitled Star Wars fighting game. Though this is more of a pitch prototype, nothing really came of it, though gameplay does exist. It was being developed by Studio Gigante, the team that made the Xbox exclusive Tao Feng fighting game, which I don't really like. At one point, they pitched this idea for a Star Wars game and made a tech demo for it. And to be honest with you, I like the idea, but it looks a little slow, just like Tao Feng. I do like that there is insta-kill moves like Bushido Blade for the PS1, but I feel like if it was using the Tao Feng engine, it could have easily have been a dud. Yet we'll never know. This was just a pitch and never went anywhere, but I do think it was interesting enough to put into this list. Next is StarCraft Ghost, probably the most anticipated of all of these games on today's list. It was a spin-off game in the StarCraft universe from Blizzard. It was a multi-console release that would move away from the RTS gameplay of the original. Instead, it was a third-person action stealth game where the lead character Nova would be acrobatic and have a large moveset. Looking at it, it honestly reminds me a lot of Splinter Cell, and I can see the inspiration there. Funny enough, you can actually play this one today, or at least a prototype of it, which is robust and full of levels. For me, one of the biggest parts of this game is its look. If released, it could have easily been one of the best looking Xbox games. It has a sleek style, and I'm a sucker for a futuristic setting like this. That, along with the shadows and the surprisingly deep stealth system, this game had a lot going for it. On top of that, it was going to have a large multiplayer component, and it seemed like it was going to be a full experience for the Xbox. The biggest issue that you saw pop up in magazines like Official Xbox Magazine was that there was so much going on, and it seemed overly ambitious, which seemed to be true for this game, as it was in development hell for a long time. It had originally been announced in 2002 for a 2000 release by Nihilistic Software. Unfortunately, things were not working out for that team, and production was moved to Swinging Ape, who pushed it out to a 2005 release. It got a ton of hype, probably more than any other game here, with huge E3 booths, cover stories, and so much more. It missed its 2005 window though, and by 2006 it was put on hold. What I could infer was that they were looking to push it to the next generation of consoles, but too much work had already been put into this version, and it just left the game hanging, and soon it fizzled out and never released. StarCraft Ghost is one of those games that just deserves a deep dive video on my channel because it looks like an awesome stealth game and could have been one of the best games of its generation. I guess that's what hurts the most about these games, is that we'll never know what the experience would be like, but luckily, we do get a little piece of this one today. Next is 100 Bullets, another one that has a playable prototype because it was extremely close to being finished. This was a third-person shooter based on the comic book series of the same name from DC Comics. I'm honestly not too familiar with it, but looking through it, it has a great art style. It's the type of comic that would fit with a video game stylistically, giving off a 13 vibe. This is a fun-looking shooter with bright colors and some fun action mechanics. It seemed like it was all about speed, allowing you to lock on enemies quickly and shoot. You could also use things like human shields, and there were special kill animations. IGN would compare it to a lot of games, but Dead to Rights came up specifically at one point, and I do agree this game looks a lot like that one. And I love a good comic book game, especially when it's not based off of a super popular superhero. DC was working with Acclaim to get this game made, and it was being developed by Acclaim Austin. It was in development for a little bit with previews in magazines and E3 showings. It was set to come out in 2004, and reading around, it was very close to actually hitting that date with a demo ready and everything. Unfortunately though, Acclaim was having major financial issues at this time, and they shut down months before this game was released. This game was close to hitting the market, but it went away just like that. Eventually the rights were obtained to make a game on this property by a different studio, but it wouldn't be the same game. What's funny is that game never happened either, leaving a dead spot for a game based on this franchise. And looking at the gameplay, you can tell this might not have been a game to change everything, but it looked like a lot of fun. A comic book style game with loads of action. I feel like it could have easily have been a cult hit. I would have loved to have seen a finished version of this one. The last section we have today is for rare games. Conker had enough to get its own section, but these don't really fit anywhere else, since 1 is a prototype remake and 2 did eventually get released, but I felt like these were popular enough to at least get a spot here. First up, we have a game that was ported as a launch title to the 360. And that was Cameo Elements of Power. This game is worthy of a full deep dive into its history because its development history was a nightmare. Luckily, Rare did a great video on it already, which I'll link below. This game started its life on the Nintendo 64 and was a lot like Pokemon, which is different to the final game, which is more about Cameo transforming in the creatures. This seemed to change more as it went into production for the GameCube, and we have footage of that game and it looks close to the final product. Though much like Conker, once Rare was bought out by Microsoft, everything shifted to the Xbox. Though Cameo was not cancelled, it was continuing to be worked on. This is another game with a prototype that we can play on the Xbox, and it's an impressive release for the console graphically. This game kept getting pushed though, but eventually it did get moved to the 360 and we got it on launch day, meaning we did actually get this game. Another one that we did finally get was Perfect Dark Zero. Another one that started development on the GameCube and was initially described as a prototype. Once they moved to the Xbox, their ambitions grew significantly. There isn't as much information available on the Xbox version of this game, but it had been in development for a while, and the developers had planned for a large number of people to play online in matches. The technology seemed to push the Xbox a lot, and for those reasons it was moved to the 360, along with probably a push from Microsoft, and it was released as a launch title alongside Cameo. The final rare game of the bunch is Banjo-X, which is a remake of the original game for the Xbox with enhanced graphics, though it would have a twist on it. In this game, the characters would be aware of being in the remake, and they would try to alter the path of the original game, which sounds on brand for Rare's sense of humor. It had another odd idea where Gruntilda would be competing against you as you play, where she would pick up collectibles in the world. It would be powered by AI, some crazy stuff, but this game was never announced, and it only became known because it was leaked later on. It seems like it didn't get very far, so this was more of an idea that just never made it, but it's still worth putting here. But I do think that's where we're going to end the list for today. That was a lot of games, and it was so much fun looking at all of these and seeing what could have been. As stated before, there are so many more, like Dirty Harry or X-Girl, that I'd love to talk about at another time. So if you do want another list like this, please put in the comments what you want to hear about, and I'll definitely make another one. Leave a like if you enjoyed it, really helps me out in the algorithm. Subscribe to keep up with retro Xbox content like this, and check out my second channel, Camp Extras, for more retro content. And I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube channel members. Thank you so much for your support. You really help out the channel, and I'll see you here next time at Camp Xbox.